Welcome to another episode of Wild and Well. Today I am joined by Jojo Hogan. She is a postpartum doula, massage therapist, and the founder of the Slow Postpartum Movement. Welcome, Jojo. I can't wait to have this conversation with you all about creating a slow postpartum. This is something that I am so passionate about, and I know you are so passionate about. So I am excited to talk to you. But before we dive into all of that, can you start by just letting us know one thing that you've done today to take care of yourself?
Oh, of course. It's so nice to be here, Hilary. Thank you so much for having me. I can absolutely share that with you because I did it just before I jumped on the call with you. And that is, I'm really lucky to live in a beautiful part of the UK in the countryside of a county called Devon. And just before I jumped on the phone to you, I walked with my dog in the woodland, a beautiful woodland just up the road from my house, and it was all full of bird song and summer gorgeousness. And I just find that getting out in the countryside with my pup feeds my soul.
Oh, how beautiful. Yeah, there's nothing like going for a walk in nature. So, can you tell us about yourself and what it is that you do as a postpartum doula? Because there's so many different facets to this.
Sure. Actually, I just did a podcast episode myself a few days ago about what I do in a day as a postpartum doula. So it's interesting that you brought that up because I think a lot of people don't know what postpartum doulas do as such, unless you kind of are in that world. And so I qualified as a postpartum doula about 10 years ago after running. Before that, I had a beautiful business in Auckland, New Zealand. I ran a pregnancy and postpartum spa, like a wellness center that I set up for pregnant and postpartum women. And I love that business. It was wonderful. We had massage and we had therapists and we had midwives and we had a great range of people. But I found that often I was only really kind of caring for and supporting women up till the birth of their babies, right? You know, they used to come for pregnancy yoga and pregnancy massage and all the things when they were pregnant. And then afterwards, they would kind of just drop off the radar. I wouldn't see them after the birth of their baby. And I tell this story, a few times actually, because it's really important, I think, is that sometimes I would see them maybe a few months later, weeks or months later, and I'd found out from so many people the story kind of repeated itself that the postpartum period of time after the birth had been really challenging for them, and they hadn't anticipated or expected it to be so tough. And I felt bad because I thought, I wasn't on the other side for them. I took them right up to the birth and I gave them all the lovely massages and yoga classes and birth education, but there was nobody there on the other side to support them. And consequently, they struggled with things like, breastfeeding issues and trauma after the birth and loneliness and a lack of support and feeling overwhelmed and exhausted, which, as you know, because I know you two talk about this a lot, it's so common. And so I decided that I wanted to be there on the other side to be able to hold the space for these mothers and these families. And then I found out about the job of a postpartum doula, and that's exactly what we do. That's what we are. We a doula is somebody who is non-medically trained, but is there to support kind of big life transitions. And I'm sure many of your listeners would have been familiar with, a birth doula, and even there is even death doulas now, and divorce doulas, and cancer treatment doulas. And so it's kind of being there to support and hold space and kind of travel the journey with somebody going through a big life transition. And as a postpartum doula, I really am there just to support the new mother or the new parents and family in any way that they need. And I bring different skill sets to the space because I, as you mentioned, am a massage therapist. I'm a yoga teacher. I work with herbs and healing. Um, and I love cooking as well. So many of those things I kind of bring in. And I always say to people, I'm there to mother the mother, really, to hold space for her and to be there to care for her. I don't look after babies. I know, especially in the States, actually, a lot of postpartum doulas are there to do baby care. But my role, I think, is much more to look after the mother and to be there to care for her in those precious, fleeting, intense, sometimes challenging weeks after the birth.
Yeah, and that is so important because after the birth, all the attention goes to the baby, right? And we often forget about the mother. So it's so important that the mother is mothered and that you're doing this work. And I think there are so many people that go into pregnancy not even knowing what a birth doula is, let alone a postpartum doula. So I am really passionate about getting the word out about people like you who are doing this work that is so important because there really isn't that much support postpartum. I think that's one of the things that the mothers I work with say that they're just lacking support and they're feeling isolated, like you say. And a lot of them expect that they should be able to just do it all by themselves, which is ridiculous. But there is this expectation.
Absolutely. And it's one of the things I talk to a lot about, to the families that I work with. I think the expectation comes from living in. Have you ever heard the acronym a weird culture, WEIRD? It's the acronym is Western Educated Industrial Rich Democratic Society, right? That we live in this Western culture, and it's known as weird because actually it's an incredibly strange way to live because it's not the way that evolution has brought human beings up for hundreds and thousands of years. Human beings were always meant to be, well, have always up till very recently, the last 200 or 300 years, have lived in small groups of 50 to 100 people for many many centuries until I suppose cities and agriculture came along. Um, but even then, people lived in villages and tribes and still do in most of the world. And when babies are brought up in those communities, they're cared for by a number of people, not just the parents. They're not one or two parent people. And they've been evolutionarily designed to be cared for by more than one or two people because, as you know, babies are high needs. Human babies are high needs. They have these enormous brains, they grow very quickly, and they're very vulnerable for at least the first, what, 10 years, you could argue, of their life, 15. I've got a 25-year-old, he still needs a little bit of support.
I
Oh,
was going to say 25.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And but instead, because we live in this weird culture, we think that we have to bring up our babies alone, and then we wonder why we struggle when they need us. Let's face it, 24/7. There's no other job that's 24/7. And in other cultures, indigenous cultures, traditional cultures, perhaps we wouldn't need postpartum doulas because a mother would be not only supported by her community of that lived close by, but also her baby would be being cared for and nurtured by a group of people as well.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think in the past, ideally, people did have those villages, and it's really unfortunate that we don't have that now. And there's a shift that I think we have to make with our mindset that maybe we have to hire that help. It may not just be automatically built in, and that is totally okay to hire it because it's better to get that than feel like there's something wrong with doing that and then trying to do it all by yourself and really struggling. And that's not great for you or for the baby. Like your mental health and physical health as a mother shapes your baby's experience of those first few years. And it's really critical that you're taken care of.
I agree completely. And the way that I would frame it and do frame it to new parents is that you're investing in yourself, right? When you hire out, when you bring in help and support, whether that be food deliveries, frozen meals to put in the freezer, a cleaner to come and do the housework so that you don't have to while you're caring for your baby, someone to walk the dog, postpartum doula to care for you and maybe give you some massages. That's all an investment in your own health and well-being so that you don't end up exhausted and overwhelmed, because remember, you're doing a job which is meant to be done by a group of people. It's never meant to be done by one or two people. That's not how evolution designed human babies. And I have a little mantra which was taught to me by one of my teachers, Julia Jones, and that's services, not stuff, right? Babies don't need very much stuff at all. And whatever stuff they do need generally can be borrowed or bought secondhand or invested in at a later date. I mean, let's face it, a baby doesn't want to sleep in their own crib for quite some time, right? And so I think if we're on a bit of a budget, like many new families are, ask for other people to help you invest. Like, for example, instead of people buying you gifts for the baby, which often you do get, ask for people to invest in your health and well-being, and or buy the secondhand baby buggy and the secondhand crib, and use that money that you've saved to invest in your own health, well-being, and other people to support you.
Yeah, I love how meal trains are becoming really, really common as gifts because I think back to when I had my first baby, the most impressive gifts that I just loved the best were the meals that people either came over to my house and cooked for me or dropped off because all the things, like you say, I didn't really use. I barely used anything. The baby, like my babies just wanted me. And I didn't have the energy to like cook really nourishing meals or have the time or capacity to do that. So those meals were just so, so important.
Food is love, right? That's what I always think. We show our love by cooking and feeding people, and I think that's across the world that is the same. And what we need, going back to our own well-being, is your baby needs. What your baby needs is a mother who's rested and nourished and cared for and loved. And when a mother feels all of those things, nurtured, nourished, loved, then she can give them to her baby, right? But if a mother is overwhelmed, exhausted, tired, stressed because she's trying to do everything, then she's not going to be able to regulate her own nervous system. This is another thing I often talk about, is that babies depend on us to regulate their nervous system. They're not capable of doing it until they're at least 3 years old. And so they depend on something we call co-regulation, which means there's a regulation which happens to the mother's nervous system and the baby's nervous system in sort of synergy. And when a mother is healthy and well, then it's so much easier for them to nurture their baby's nervous system and regulate it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I think a huge shift that we have to make as well, like another mindset shift, is that taking care of ourselves is the best thing for our babies because when we become mothers, and I think women in general, we're naturally there as carers and maybe even people pleasers and putting others first. So when we have kids, we can easily slip into, I have to do everything for them. Who cares about myself? So if we can at least frame it, and it's absolutely true that if you take care of yourself, it's so much easier to be the best mother for your child, show up exactly what you're saying. Like you're able to co-regulate so much more easily. And that makes parenting easier. That's like helps your child develop really healthy ways of regulating their own nervous system. There's so many benefits for our baby. So I think some people think, oh, I don't need that, or it's selfish, or it's just like unnecessary. Everything needs to just be for my baby. But to remind ourselves that this is also great for the baby, it is necessary for the baby. It isn't just you being selfish or putting yourself first, if that is seen as a negative thing, which I don't think it is, but I think a lot of people think that way.
I do. I think unfortunately we live in a uh, place, a community, a culture, I should say, where women are culturally conditioned to please, to be people pleasers, unfortunately, and to not put themselves first. I see it all the time, and I think one of the biggest challenges of my work actually is trying to convince new mothers and families that especially women, that they need to put themselves first and they need to also ask for help. There's a little bit of it works both ways, actually. Sometimes people struggle, and I know I put myself in this camp as well, with wanting to do it all and thinking you can do it all. I mean, let's face it, we were brought up in the wave of fourth wave feminism, and I'm a huge feminist. We're told that women and girls can do it all, which we can, right? We can, but sometimes we shouldn't have to do it all. Right? We can, but we shouldn't have to. And sometimes asking for help and putting our hand up and saying, actually, in order for me to be my best self, I can't do this all on my own. I'm going to have to bring in help, can be one of the hardest things for new mothers to admit. And sometimes it's when I work with partners as well, it's not the partner that's struggling to ask for help. They're all over it. They're happy to get the cleaner in, it's the actual new mother who's saying, well, I should be able to do all this. I should. So sometimes we're up against our own selves, aren't we?
Yeah, I see that time and time again that it's sometimes there's partners that have those expectations that the mom should do a lot themselves, but honestly, that's so rare in the cases I've seen is it's the partner being like, okay, like let's get a cleaner, like let's hire this person, let's do that. And it's the moms who are not feeling comfortable or competent in that yeah, we need to stop that because it is not helping anybody.
Right. Well, that's why I love your work with your changes of mindset, because that's what we're talking about, aren't we? We're talking about a change of mindset, putting ourselves at the top, and then knowing that that trickle down effect will benefit our whole family, not just a baby as well, our partner, our relationship with our partner, other children. There's that classic saying, when mama's happy, everybody's happy. So, and that is really true. But sometimes we have to work on that mindset, which I know is the work that you do.
And can you tell us about this slow postpartum movement? Like, what exactly is slow postpartum versus just postpartum?
Sure, sure. Well, when I started my work as a postpartum doula, and I was also doing quite a lot of birth education and chatting to my students, my yoga students about the weeks following birth, I also had a real interest in something that's called the slow living movement. And the slow living movement is an international movement, a global movement, which was started about 40, 50 years ago, I think, and it started in Italy. And the story of the slow living movement was that it was a small town in Italy, and they wanted to build a McDonald's there, right? It's a fast food outlet, and they didn't have anything like that. And the whole town rebelled against this. They petitioned against it, and they managed to stop this McDonald's being built because they said, we don't have fast food in this town. We have slow food. Our food is all locally grown, it's sustainable, it's organic. We sit down to eat with our families, we have long meals. If people can buy burgers from the burger bar, that's going to all end. They really saw it as being a threat to their way of life. And actually, that whole movement that became the slow food movement, which again traveled all over the world, but then morphed into a more global kind of umbrella movement of slowness. And really what that was is people pushing back against the capitalist consumerist ideals of the people that have the most stuff win, and the faster that we go, the quicker we get, the bigger we get, the more successful we are, the happier we'll be. And people started to push back against that, and that turned into a global movement of people wanting to live more intentional, more sustainable lives in opposition to the fast-paced world all around us. And so the slow living movement has morphed into, as I mentioned, slow food, slow parenting, slow travel, slow money. In fact, there's even whole slow cities that are registered or certified as being a slow city. And when I was teaching about the postpartum weeks to my students, I realized that a lot of what I was saying to them was slowing down over this time, was planning the postpartum intentionally, was taking time to be with their babies without any pressure, without any um, expectation that they were going to bounce back from the birth, because as you and I know, we're never the same after we have a baby. And we need this sort of liminal space in between these two worlds, the world of before you became a mother, and the world of parenting, where we can just sink into a soft little bubble of care and love and joy, and be cared for by others, and to recover our bodies and to heal from pregnancy and birth. And of course, this, as we probably will go on to talk about, is something that's done in all cultures around the world. All traditional cultures have this little window of time, 40 days often it is, 6 to 12 weeks, the first 40 days, the sacred window, it's called in Ayurvedic medicine, the golden month in Chinese medicine, where women have this space and time to rest, to be cared for, to be nurtured, to be nourished by their community as they learn to fall in love with their baby. And I realized that so much that I was talking about was to do with slowing down the postpartum weeks, and hence the slow postpartum movement was born.
I want to move to one of these slow cities that you talk about. That sounds incredible. We need more of this in our world.
Absolutely. I'm lucky enough. Well, I say lucky, but I made the conscious decision actually to move from a big city in New Zealand, even though New Zealand's a beautiful place, it's gorgeous. I wanted to live more in alignment with my values and that slow living philosophy. So I moved back to the UK and into a place where I used to live, which is very rural and very quiet. And it's a little village where everybody knows each other and we all, grow our own food and live quite sustainably. And so, yeah, I try to live in that way myself.
Yeah, beautiful. So, how do we prepare for this type of slow postpartum? Because, like you and I have talked about previously off air, it's so critical that we do plan. We plan so much for the birth and not so much for postpartum. We kind of forget about the other side.
I knew I was pregnant, but why didn't anyone tell me I was going to have a baby? I heard that saying once. It just, yeah, epitomized it, doesn't it? And I'm so glad you asked me that question because that is so much of what I talk about is the importance of postpartum planning, and that is the work that I think in all the work that I do with the families that I work with. I think sitting down with new parents before baby arrives and helping them create a postpartum plan is probably one of the most important things that I do, because once that postpartum plan is thought about and put in place, then my work actually becomes really easy because all I have to do is facilitate it to unfold. And, we already know how it's going to look and feel. With a few, I mean, there's always blips, there's always hiccups, it's like a roller coaster, as you know, but just the whole point of thinking about how do I want the weeks after my birth of my baby to look? How do I want them to feel? Starting to get clear on that can be a game changer for new families. And I know that you've got a lot of different people that listen to your podcast, and some of them maybe are pregnant, and some of them are maybe professionals who work with pregnant couples. And I think that just sitting down and doing a little bit of a planning session where you talk sitting down with either the people that you're working with or your partner if you're pregnant, and asking yourself questions like, as I mentioned, how do we want this time to look and feel? What's important to us? What are our values? Because the values that you have in your family, and those are going to be different for everybody, are kind of like your North Star. That's where you're guiding yourself towards what's important and what's not important. That's the other thing. So you don't get befuddled in all the maelstrom of advice and overwhelm that can happen. And for many of the people that I work with, because they're attracted to my slow postpartum philosophy, what's important to them is intentional living, sustainable living, having time and space away from the rush. So, how are you going to do that? Well, we've mentioned it before, you're going to need help, right? You're going to need help to parent this baby and also have time to heal, to rest, to recover. So we might talk about who that family's village is. And just as you mentioned before, sometimes they will have friends and family around who can come and care for them. Sometimes they'll struggle to ask for help, of course. So we'll work on those barriers. But perhaps we want to bring them in. Perhaps we need to hire the cleaner for a few weeks. Perhaps we want to take on a postpartum doula. This is often my role, obviously. Perhaps we need someone to walk the dog, cook the meals, organize the meal train. So once we've got that all set up, great. Everybody knows what their role is, what their job is, what this family needs. And then we might talk about things like what challenges are going to come up in the past postpartum, because let's face it, it's a wonderful, joyful, but yet intense and sometimes challenging time. So, what will happen if the mum really wants to nurse her baby or breastfeed her baby and she's not able to? She hits problems. Who are we going to call? Let's have their number on speed dial, right? Who is going to, who is the pediatrician? Who's the postpartum physiotherapist? Who's the postpartum massage therapist in the area? Who does marriage guidance and marriage counseling, just in case the marriage, the partnership hits a few speed bumps, which is very common. Let's have all these people nearby and know who they are and who to and quickly be able to call them if we need to. So it's like planning the whole kind of idea of, and sometimes it's like all these challenges might not arise, but let's face it, some of them will. What will happen when one or both parents are feeling completely sleep deprived? How are they going to work that? What will happen? What impact will exhaustion have on them? Let's talk about it all before baby comes.
It's so important to have those conversations ahead of time because they're things that we don't think about. Like you said, we think about being pregnant, maybe giving birth, but we don't even think about the postpartum time. And for so many of us, we've never experienced that, whether it's our own experience or seen it from friends or family. So we really have no idea what to even plan for a lot of the time. So working with somebody like yourself is just so incredible to bring up those possible bumps in the road and then problem solve around them. So I wish I had done this. I know that my experience would have been completely different if I had. And I believe that like every family's experience would be so different if we did really plan for that and just have simple solutions in place.
I agree completely. And that's where a professional, somebody like myself or like you yourself, who works in that space can be really useful, because all that you see out there is the guides of, what baby crib to buy and what baby buggy to get, and the 18 different kinds of, I don't know, breast pump and all these kind of things, which, as we've just mentioned, most of them we don't need and the baby doesn't need. But we do need those resources on hand. We need those care professionals on hand. We might not use all of them. We need to understand the effects of sleep deprivation and exhaustion. We need to be able to know which of our friends and family can bring a meal next Tuesday night, or all of those things can be so, so useful. And I think we just don't think about it. We think about planning the birth, but not the weeks following.
Yeah. And a lot of I think the fear around birth and even postpartum is uncertainty and not knowing what's going to happen. So just having that plan in place can be so helpful, even if we don't struggle breastfeeding and we don't need to access that lactation consultant or whatever it is that we plan for. Just knowing that if that problem does come up, we have a plan for it can just bring down the overwhelm, can help us to feel that sense of control in a situation that we really don't have that much control over. So I think even for our mental health and for anxiety that's really common and overwhelm, planning for this can be so, so helpful.
I agree. I agree. But you've just touched on an important point, though, I think, is that one of the hardest things for new parents, and I know this myself from my own experience, is the lack of control. Because we have this little baby and we don't know who they are, right? They have just arrived in the world. They're brand new. And until we figure out who this little person is and what their needs are, and what they like and what they don't like, and how much they want to sleep and how much they don't want to sleep, and when they want to feed, or whether, all these little details about this person. Because funnily enough, babies are not generic, right? That's another thing we get told, is that, if we just follow this plan, or we follow this book, or we follow this routine, that it's all going to fall into place. And of course that is not true either. Every baby is different, because funnily enough, babies are people, and they have their own likes and dislikes and personalities. So, going back to the slow postpartum, it takes time to learn about each other. It takes time for this beautiful mother baby dyad to develop. And it takes space and rest and gentleness for mothers and babies just to be together, to learn about each other. And that's the space that I hold as a postpartum doula. And it's sacred space, it's beautiful, sacred space. And it's so much easier for the new mother and baby if they're not rushed, if they're not overwhelmed, if they're not exhausted, if there's this bubble of care and support around them to allow this beautiful dance to happen.
Why do you think that we lost that sacred time in our Western society? Like, what happened there?
Well, I think, as I've touched on before, if you look into how other cultures view the postpartum, as I mentioned, every traditional culture all around the world, over 200 indigenous cultures, set aside time for mothers to care for their babies. There is this myth of the mother giving birth in the field, right, and going right back to work, putting the baby in her back and going right back to work. That actually never happened in traditional cultures. Generally, mothers are given the time and the space to heal. 6 weeks, 12 weeks, where their work is covered and done by other people while they heal from birth. But I think what happened is that we lived like this and evolved like this for hundreds of thousands of years. And then more recently, we settled into agricultural communities where we became, first of all, hunter-gatherer communities and then agricultural communities. But even in an agricultural community, women were and still are sometimes given the space to heal and recover. But quite recently, only 300 years ago or so, I think, the Industrial Revolution happened, and people moved from the cities from the farms to the cities, right? And then they went out to work at a factory for 8 or 10, 12 hours a day. And so when the people were going out to work, who was left holding the baby? You know, only one person. And as I touched on before, babies were never meant to only be held by one person. I think that even more recently, I was watching, I don't know if you've ever seen it in the States, but there's a program over here called Call the Midwife, and it's set in the UK, and it starts in the 1930s, actually, and it goes all the way right through to the 1970s. But the memoir, was written by a midwife in the East End of London, which is very working class, poverty-ridden area of London. But even then, I remember sort of seeing how these women were living in close contact with each other because they were all in these tiny, tiny little flats. But of course, even then, women were popping in and out of each other's houses and looking after each other's babies. And there was aunties and people going in and out, and the children were running in and out of each other's houses. And when I did my training in Indonesia, I trained in Bali for a while. And in Bali, again, family compounds. The children were running in and out of different people's houses, and the children are owned by the family. They are cared for by the family. And there's a beautiful tradition in Bali where they have a ceremony where the newborn baby's feet touch the ground for the first time. Yeah. And that's when they're 12 weeks old. Before that, they've never touched the earth. And that's because they're carried around by everybody, not just the mother.
Yeah, that's beautiful. How do you think we get back to that? Like, do you see in your work that we are moving towards more awareness that we need support, we need the village, we need to think about postpartum and treat our babies and our mothers differently during it? Or do you see that we're just moving further and further away from that?
I like to be optimistic. I'm a glass half full kind of girl, and I like to be optimistic. I feel a big part of the work that you do and the work that I do and the work that others I see in my space, and I know I probably live in a little doula bubble, but I see more people talking about the village. I see, obviously grieving the loss of it, but also acknowledging that that's what we need. Women putting their hands up and saying, this is what I need. I can't do this alone, and being honest about not trying to do it alone. I suppose for every Instagram account where somebody's raw and honest, there's another 20 where women are, juggling babies and beautiful homes and their influences, and everyone looks at them and says, but they've got it all together. Why am I struggling, right? So it's a little bit of both. And of course, I think that's one of the things we look around and social media is terrible for this, obviously, and think, well, everyone else seems to have it all under control. Why am I finding it so hard? But as long as people like yourself keep educating, keep talking about it, and people like me and other wonderful postpartum doulas keep talking and educating, then hopefully the word can get out that we were never meant to do this work alone. And if we don't have the village, we need to go and find it, because that is, we are social creatures, and human babies were always meant to be parented and loved by, a group of people, and mothers were always meant to be cared for by a group of people too.
Yeah, I agree. What about the moms who are listening that are like well past the fourth trimester? And what advice do you have for them to be able to slow down in motherhood, especially when everything just seems so busy and their time seems limited? What can those mothers take away from this conversation?
I think that's a really good point, because I often meet women whose babies are older or even adults, and when I talk to them about what I do, they get this kind of misty-eyed, almost, tearful look on their face, and they're just like, I wish I'd known this. I wish this had happened for me. I wish somebody had come and cared for me like this. Um, and they grieve that time that they lost, and that is really sad. But I think we can bring the concepts of slow living into our lives at any time. And I think we can do so by understanding what capitalism and consumerists, the messages that we're being told, which is that, we need to have all this stuff, we need to have the newest, I don't know, our children need to have these clothes, or we need to be keeping up with the Joneses, and just questioning that, right? Do children really, are children really happier the more material possessions they have? Are we really happier the more material possessions we have? Or do we really think seriously and intentionally about, where we spend our money? Because if we question that, then we can maybe reduce our spending on things that we don't need. And let's face it, most of those things are bad for the environment as well. And we create more time, Do children need to be doing a lot of activities every night of the week? Or can we have time and space where we can just step back and allow children to rest and to chill and to, be who they are? I mean, I know I'm being a bit contentious here, but this whole thing of we have to strive to earn the most money, because the richest people are the happiest people. Now, is that true? I think we probably know the answer to that, right? So I think it's just that questioning, and going back to that thing that I often ask. My first question I ask the families I work with: what are your values? What's important to you? And when we truly ask that, what are our values? And then think, well, is the way that we're spending most of our time in alignment with those values? Then sometimes that makes us question and perhaps make changes.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. That's one of the starting points that I go to with the work that I do with mothers is coming to your values and getting really clear on your values and your priorities, and then making your decisions and shaping your life based off those. And it's surprising how we talk so much about goals in our society, yet values are supposed to be there to guide our goals. And most of us have no idea what our values even are.
I so agree. I think it's brilliant that you're doing that work with your clients, because I think that's the thing, isn't it? And the thing about goals too, which I remember a coach of mine once said, and I was very guilty of this and still can be, because I think, again, we're told that it's the right thing to do. You strive and strive and strive to reach this goal, which you think is going to make you happy. Once you get it, you immediately put the bar up again another level, don't you? Do you sit and sort of feel happy and content with where you are? No, because immediately you're told that you need to have more, or a higher qualification, or more stuff, or the latest model, or whatever it is. It never ends, right? And so again, taking it back to slow living is questioning that. Do I have to jump on this merry-go-round of constant consumerism, constant consumption? Um, is working, absolute to exhaustion, 50 weeks a year, just so I can have 2 weeks holiday off to be happy in that 2 weeks. Is it worth it, right? And there's no right or wrong answer, by the way. It's different for everybody because everybody's values are different, but it's just asking yourself those questions.
Yeah, it's about getting clear on what is meaningful and important to you rather than just going along with what the people around you are doing or your society is telling you. Some people work is so important and it's their favorite thing and they want to work that much. Great. But you want to be clear on that. And for somebody else, it might be different. And that's great too. It's about aligning your life, like you say.
Exactly. I mean, a good example of that is for example, I drive a very basic car, which is a second-hand car, and um, and and I'm happy with that car, right? Because I've chosen, like, I could spend, I don't know, probably 10 times more on a car, but that money for me, I'd rather have time. For me, time is one of my biggest things that if I could have time to sit in my garden, time to walk in the countryside, I'd much rather not be earning money to buy an expensive car or clothes. I'd much rather be spending that time doing the things that I love doing, if you know what I mean. So time is probably more important to me than possessions, if I think about it in that way. So I'm happy to buy all my things secondhand so that I can have that time.
And can you tell us about how people can learn more from you and work with you? I know you have a beautiful podcast, Slow Postpartum podcast. Can you tell people a little bit about this and your other offers?
Oh, I'd love to. I work with pregnant people, couples, women, and families around the world. I do in-person care, obviously. That's my work as a postpartum doula. I do mainly in the UK, but I do travel to offer in-person care as well. But I also work online, so I can work as a virtual doula, helping people plan their postpartums out and doing all the things that we've talked about today. And then I also work with doulas and birth professionals, not just doulas, but also lactation consultants, midwives, and other people that work in that space, in that perinatal space, teaching them the values and the philosophy of slow postpartum. And the podcast, as you mentioned, which I was lucky enough to have you as a guest on a few weeks ago, which was wonderful, where experts in the postpartum field talk about postpartum wellness. But I also interview new mothers as well about their experience, how it worked out for them when they planned and experienced a slow postpartum. So yeah, you can find me on my social media at Slow Postpartum, and there's a couple of free resources on there. There's a little ebook for doulas and birth professionals where I outline sort of how to help the families that they work for to plan for this time. And there's a free ebook for pregnant mothers and couples as well on how to plan their own slow postpartum.
Yeah, that's incredible. I love how you have resources for people wherever they are in the world, and yet you also provide a lot more intimate care for those people that are more local. Like recently, you were doing a live-in postpartum doula job, right?
Good. I really loved that. I really enjoyed that. And that was, it kind of gave me the opportunity to offer a wraparound care. It wasn't 24/7. I mainly worked days, although I did have some nights where I was on call. But it was just so lovely to be in the house with this mum and be able to care from her from the moment I took her breakfast cup of tea and breakfast in bed on a tray to the evening where I tucked her up with her baby and brought her a cup of beautiful chai or something like that in the evening before they settled down for sleep. And everything in between, making food all day, and we did yoga, and I gave her massages, and tried to keep her in bed. She'd had a C-section, so I kept her in bed for as long as I could throughout that whole 2 weeks, just only taking time out to sit in the garden in the sunshine. And it was lovely. It was exactly how every mother's postpartum should be. And I wish more mothers could experience that.
Where can people find postpartum doulas if they don't happen to live like in the area where you are? How do we find these magical people?
Magical unicorns, yeah. I think you just Google postpartum doulas, and you should be able to find someone in your area. But I think just make sure that they have the experience and the qualifications to care for you as a new mother, rather than just your baby. I think sometimes in the States, I get the kind of a little bit confused, because some postpartum doulas in the States seem to just do baby care at nighttime, which is really useful and wonderful too, while the parents sleep. But I feel that I don't tend to do that very often, because my skills and the benefits of what I do are much more focused on the mother. So find someone who can cook you delicious meals and cuddle your baby while you eat them, and be there for emotional support, breastfeeding, all those kind of things help you to build your village of support as well.
Yeah. And was there anything that you really wanted to talk about here that I didn't ask?
I think we've covered such a lot, and I know you and I can talk all day because we're so aligned in our philosophy and values. But I think if anybody's listening and they want to find out more about what is normal postpartum care, and I say normal, it's historical really, and we're losing it a little bit here in the West. But if you Google, the golden month, the first 40 days, the sacred window, traditional Indigenous postpartum care, you'll see that this is not a new thing. This is not a newfangled invention. That women have traditionally and historically always been cared for in this way for 6 to 12 weeks after the birth of their babies. And perhaps that would give the new mothers out there confidence and encouragement to know that this is their birthright, not just a modern day luxury.
Yeah, what a beautiful way to end. Thank you so much for coming on here and sharing all your knowledge. And thank you for the work that you do for so many mothers and families.
Thank you.